Welcome to Sales Tax and More, your go-to resource for all things state tax related. Now, here is your host, Michael Fleming.
Hi, everyone. Mike Fleming, founder of Sales Tax and More, and today's host of the Sales Tax and More podcast, where we talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is, of course, sales tax. We've got a repeat guest today, great guest, Scott Peterson. Accounting Today named him one of the top 100 most influential people of 2018, 2019. And we're going to discuss some of the impacts of the coronavirus and how state and federal governments are responding. Before we introduce Scott, I want to introduce you to his employer, Avalara. Very little information here. Some of you know a lot about Avalara. But they're a leading provider of cloud-based tax compliance solutions who help businesses of all sizes achieve compliance with transaction taxes, including sales and use, VAT, excise, communications, and they're constantly adding new tax types. Scott is their Vice President of U.S. Tax Policy and Government Relations. Prior to working with Avalara, Scott was the first executive director of the Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board and was the director of the South Dakota Sales Tax Division. So welcome back, Scott.
Thank you, Mike. It's glad to be back.
I think times are certainly interesting. I mean, it's unprecedented, some of the steps that are being required by states or being suggested by the federal government in shutdowns and working from home. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No. I mean, there's been some. I mean, obviously the recession had a kind of is going to end up in the same spot as I think we're going to be in this situation, but from an entirely different perspective. Mm-hmm. That was more from the bottom up and not the top down. 9/11 was similar in the way that the governments reacted to the attack, but it was a very short-lived kind of reaction, which, ultimately then resulted in lots of, restrictions on how we fly and how we travel and things like that. But, otherwise, no. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day who lives in D.C., and she said she was talking to a bunch of young congressional staff people, and they said, well, you don't seem very nervous about this. And she said, well, you didn't live through 9/11. You didn't live through the anthrax scare where no one in Washington, D.C. could open their mail for months. And frankly, I'm not sure they still can. I think it all still goes off and gets irradiated. And she said, and then the recession, there's stuff happens sometimes that just doesn't go the way you think it's going to go, or even imagine it could ever go that way. So,
yeah, absolutely. And some things never go back to being the same, but some things go back to being the same relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we will start going to bars and restaurants very quickly once that changes.
Absolutely. All right. So I know that Avalara has put together a number of resources outlining the different announcements from the states, and we're going to post some links to those materials along with this podcast. But can you share what some of the states, what type of tax relief are they providing? How are they providing it? What are some examples, or what are your thoughts on that?
They're in many ways doing this very randomly. And certainly not particularly coordinated. There's a lot of states that have said nothing, or if they've said is, we're not going to let people into our offices, and we encourage you to use our online services. South Dakota, all the South Dakota Department of Revenue employees are working from home.
Pretty much same thing with Texas too.
Yeah, same thing with Texas, and I just noticed before this we started taping that Kansas did the same thing. So you've got that group of people who've said we're open for business, and we hope you are too. You've got the others that said we know this is going to be hard, and we're going to provide some filing and payment relief to you. And some of them are doing it pretty broadly. Some are very, very specific. I mean, I'm trying to think of this. I can't remember the state right offhand, but one state has applied the automatic relief to bars and restaurants only, and then only to bars and restaurants below a certain level of sales.
Was that Minnesota? I think they had some sort of language like that.
Yeah, and there's a couple. I think there are up to 3 states now that have done it very specifically for bars and restaurants, and they're all doing something below a certain number of sales or sales tax collected in 2019. We've got some that have just simply said, if for some reason or other you can't pay or file, call us. And so it's one-off. It's very individual. You're going to have to prove, which is more in the traditional disaster recovery kind of thing. Every state in the country has had some sort of natural disaster before, and every one of them have something that allows them to provide relief to people. What is interesting is we're learning from this, at least I'm learning from this, which state departments of revenue or which governors have the authority to waive interest. The state of Alabama came out with a nice little measure, delaying the payment of taxes. But all they've said is that, you can delay the payment of your taxes and we will waive the penalty. We're not allowed to waive the interest. Yeah. So folks that do that, that they know that when the bill comes due, the bill is going to be plus interest. And that it's interesting. So we've had to train ourselves to look very carefully at the announcements that the states are making, because if it says they're going to waive penalty, that means they're not waiving interest. So if it doesn't say interest, you should assume there's going to be interest.
Yeah. The devil's always in the details.
Oh boy.
And, that's a chore in and of itself, is reading all of these announcements, because, the devil is in the details. And some of them, like you mentioned earlier, are automatic. Everyone gets them.
Yep, everybody.
Others, you have to apply for the exemption there. So sometimes there's more work in the application for the to get the delay in filing than if you just went out and filed or had someone like Avalara or us file for you.
Yeah, in some cases that's going to be the exact output. So there isn't any, if you've got the data and you've got the money, definitely if it's a case where all they're going to do is waive the penalties, people should file and pay. And so some of them, like Alabama's, filing is required. They won't waive the penalty I think it's June 1st. I think it's June 1st. They won't waive that penalty on June 1st unless you file those returns. So you can't just stop doing business with Alabama. You've got to continue to do business with Alabama and know you get to keep the money that you collect from your customers. But when you pay that back, you have to do it with interest, and you had better have filed those returns. Otherwise, you get nothing.
Yeah, and that's some great points to make, Scott. A lot of our clients, a lot of the questions, when they see these announcements, right away they think that, oh, I get to keep the sales tax that that I collected. And that's never going to be the case.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
No, if folks get money from the government, and which is what that would be, it's more likely to become from grants and loans and not this particular source.
Yeah, absolutely. And in most instances, that sales tax is either the customer's money or the state's money, and you can't use it for your own purposes. States generally take a very negative view of that. So all this is pushing, when you're going to pay that money down the road. It still needs to be paid. I mean, it's that obligation is not going away.
Not that we've seen so far. Everything so far is, we'll give you some extra time, but it's still going to be due.
Yeah. So with most of our clients are saying, oh, I didn't realize that. Once they realize that, they say, well, you guys are filing the returns, same thing with your customers there, then let's just go ahead and file. What's the sense of delaying it? Like in the case of Alabama, you got to pay interest.
You pay interest, yeah.
So if the money's there, and you collected it, you put it aside, then we're recommending that companies just go ahead and file now. Don't be tempted to use that money. That starts getting into a whole nother area that collected, not remitted taxes. You don't want to be in that position. So don't be tempted to use that tax money to make payroll or whatever else.
And most of these are being done under the auspices of the laws in every state that grants emergency powers to governors. Well, there's very few of those that are just completely wide open. I mean, I'm sure no governor has the emergency powers to waive criminal penalties.
Mm-hmm.
And, so there's things that they can say and do that are, granted to them under these emergency powers that they normally wouldn't be able to do. But there's a limit on them. No legislature has ever given a governor carte blanche under their Emergency Powers Act.
Yeah, and when we start talking about, spending tax money for other purposes, if you don't have it when it's ultimately due, that's when we start talking about these criminal penalties.
Yeah.
So what about reducing the tax or dropping the tax? You think the states are going to come through with anything like that?
No. So this is the problem with one of the 1,000 problems of what we're going through right now is that, it's state and local governments that are providing the majority of the relief that's happening today. I mean, it's the states that are in the cities and counties that are, operating the health departments and doing the testing, and they're ones, it's their money that's being spent on these things. What I've seen so far is every state legislature that was still in session, most of them are gone. They've all, they've taken a temporary recess. And those that were able to, recess recently or able to get their budget done, radically reduced the amount of money they think they're going to collect in taxes in 2020 and reduce their spending accordingly. And I've seen many governors who said, we want to stop. We're not going to give money to this group of people like we told them we were going to. We're not going to cut these taxes like we said we were going to. We're going to take that revenue that we've got right now that we're going to use for that. We're going to put it in a rainy day fund because it's raining.
Absolutely. And, one thing that we've been talking about internally here is in times of recession, you sometimes see states increasing the number of auditors and increasing the number of people in their discovery units because they do have such a need for revenue. And, they may be having everyone work from home and everything. And I don't think any of the states are going to step up enforcement or collection activities while we're worried about the virus. But at some point, it's going to move to the recession being the bigger issue than the virus being the bigger issue. Right. And today, we saw that Texas is out there looking to hire while they're letting people go in some areas. They're actually hiring more auditors. So we think that at least some states are gearing up to pursue people. And generally, you don't want to pursue the people in your own state. So people who are located outside the states, these remote sellers, I think that they're going to be in a much more vulnerable position. So it's just, although there's so many things on your mind right now, they can get a lot worse if we're pushing sales tax to the back burner. So,
yeah, because it is the one thing that comes in, day in, day out, because, at some point in time, we have to spend money on something.
Yeah.
It may be the last dollar we have, but we're going to spend it on something, and I've been thinking about the folks that I've been thinking about what states tax here in the last couple of days and how they get that tax collected. Online sales are the way a lot of sales are being made these days. Mm-hmm. And if there hadn't been a Wayfair decision and the states were not able to force these out-of-state retailers to collect the tax, there would be a much deeper hole in state budgets than I think it's going to that we're actually going to have, and especially in the states that don't tax groceries.
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of when we go to the grocery store, those shelves are empty in a lot of places. They're literally, they're empty of a lot of stuff. And for the states that don't tax those things, obviously all that money that was spent on restaurant meals, which is usually taxed at a much higher level, is being spent on something that's exempt.
That's a great point. I haven't even been thinking of that, but it's something to be thankful for. Not too many people are thankful for Wayfair unless you're in our business, but the states would be in a lot worse off position if we hadn't started to see the results of the Wayfair being implemented, this economic nexus. So great thoughts there. It gives me some new talking
It's
points.
frustrating, to have to, think about something that creates such a burden on people as a positive things for states. But frankly, that was the whole point behind it in the first place, was it's supposed to be a positive thing for the states.
Yeah.
Now you've got all these local retailers that aren't collecting sales tax, not because they aren't wanting to, it's because they're not open.
Yeah. There's
but
no
all
way to
these remote sellers, somebody's open somewhere, because I'm getting ads all the time for stuff.
Excuse me. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think? Can Congress help out here? I mean, this new bill we're hearing about, $1,200 or $2,400 per couple. What do you think about any of these ideas being posted? Can Congress help out?
Well, those, that type of a stimulus does increase spending for the folks that need to spend money. So to the extent that money goes to somebody who's lost their job, that money is going to have extreme value and will, help stimulate the economy. For those of us that have a job, 12, I mean, I'm not sure what they're going to use for income levels, but I'm pretty sure that my wife and I are above them. And so we're not going to get this money. But if we did, I'd like to think that we'd take that check and we'd turn it into cash and we'd walk around to our favorite restaurants and give whoever's working in our favorite restaurants the money. Because we want them to be
But the
there.
restaurants are closed. So
They're closed, I know, but and it's, so yes, this will have an effect. And if they pick the right group of people to receive the money, it has a much greater effect, which is one of the problems with any kind of economic stimulus. When you give relief broadly, a good share of it doesn't produce the outcome that you want because it goes to people who don't need the money.
Right.
So if your goal is to give money to people that need the money, I would match this to the unemployment records. I'd send this money to the state and I'd say, well, everybody that applies for unemployment in your state, we want you to give them this.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't send checks. What the hell do I know about economics? But I would send it to the people that really need it, and not the people like me and you.
Yeah, I've been hearing that some of these people going to the unemployment offices are even having a hard time because the companies are not laying people off, but they're furloughing them, which makes them not eligible.
That's right.
For the unemployment. So people like that would probably be great recipients of this $1,000. At least, they don't have to dip into savings if there are savings in order to just keep food on the table.
Yep.
So how do businesses and accounting professionals stay on top of all of this? I mean, we're seeing changes daily. I mean, just look at the federal returns. I mean, first they come out and say, hey, you still got to file your federal return by April 15th. We'll give you 3 months to pay. And, there's complaints about that. So they come back out. Was it yesterday or this morning?
I think it was this morning. This morning.
So now the returns have to be filed by July 15th. So how does someone stay on top of, not just the federal stuff, but all of the different state stuff out there?
Yeah. So I'm using every resource I can get my hands on. I mean, and for us, this isn't a U.S. state issue. This is an international issue.
Mm-hmm.
We've got customers all over the world, and so we have a whole group of people in Brighton, England, who are doing nothing but tracking what the rest of the world is doing. And every government out there is doing something, and they're all doing something different. We see a lot of return and payment delays, which is similar to what we're seeing in the U.S. states and in Congress. But we're also seeing some that are lowering the rates. And of course the government can do that, and clearly that's what Congress is going to think about that as well. I mean, the Senate bill that the Senator McConnell rolled out includes reducing tax rates. So that's kind of what we're seeing around the world. So we have a website where we have all the stuff, everything fine, but I'm trying to get information. I mean, on Monday I went through all 50 state websites, and I'm going to do so again over the weekend. There's some really good. So the AICPA has got a really good website. They're keeping track of all stuff that they hear. Who else? I know all the big accounting firms are. I'm sure you guys are as well. But I'm in the National Association of Computerized Tax Processors, NACTP. It's an organization created by the income tax people.
Mm-hmm.
But the states, they've done such a really good job over the years of convincing states that this listserv that they operate does the states more value than it does anybody else. So I get emails 4 or 5 times a day from states on that listserv telling us, okay, we're gonna whatever the federal government does, we're gonna do.
Right.
Or we're doing this. I got 3 yesterday from Massachusetts saying that they have, they've delayed the payment and return for their sales tax, of their lodging tax, for their meals and beverage tax. So it's frankly hard, and we've got probably 1, 2, 3, 5 people who were basically that's 40% of their day. Now, in a couple of weeks, every state will have said something, and we'll have it'll slow down. But
and it's not just sales tax that we have to be looking out for. It's the state income taxes and in other types of taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Also.
Well, and it's one of our problems, because we're, I don't want to, brag about us, but we're the leading provider of lodging tax compliance services in the country. A lot of those are locally imposed. I mean, going back to an earlier question, Vail, Colorado, the city council has so much money in reserve, they're going to let retailers keep the money.
Mm-hmm.
But we're seeing a number of, and it's hard to find these. There isn't a central repository for local tax notices. So somehow you have to, honestly, we're struggling. It's one of the areas where so we know that there are going to be cities and counties that delay the return and payment for their local beverage taxes or their local lodging taxes. And we're not going to find out about it until one of our customers calls us and says, hey, what are you doing filing my return? I don't have to file that till June.
It's amazing how we find out about some things.
Our customers are a great thing. Obviously they keep food on our table, but they're also great sources of intelligence.
Absolutely. Keep us at the forefront. So
yes,
we
really
like it when we get calls like that.
Yeah, we do too.
Then we got to go out and investigate it and, make sure that it's correct. And that's how we learn and update it for everyone else. So those are some of the best types of clients. So
yeah, we agree.
Well, one of the things we're going to do, Scott, is I've got some links to the resources that you're talking about, and we're going to put them out there with this podcast so that people can go and link through all of the Avalara resources, some of the independent resources you talked about, and then some of our resources that we're using here. I greatly appreciate you coming back on. Always great to talk to you. Any parting words?
So everybody that had planned on coming to our Crush 2020, our big user conference, we have moved it to the end of October. Same hotel, same city, going to be in St. Louis. And we apologize for that, but we're going to make it bigger and better now that we have some more time, and just give everybody a better opportunity than so. Other than that, everybody needs to stay safe, and
absolutely.
I'll do the best we can.
I'll give you a little bit of plug for Crush here. I don't know how you can make them bigger and better. Every year, it just seems to get bigger and better. There's lots of learning that gets done there. Great for CPE credit, great for social networking. And I don't know of anybody who throws a better party than Avalara. So,
thank you. We, this is tax. It doesn't have to be boring.
Not at all.
Make it fun.
Absolutely. So, Scott, how can people reach out and get more information about Avalara, or if they want to follow up with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
So our website, avalara.com, is it's a great place. Look under resources. At the top there should be a button or a tab there for resources, and that includes all the Wayfair information, all the marketplace facilitator laws, all that kind of stuff. And it also includes the updates that we're getting from governments on how they're responding to the virus. Most of us are working from home, but we're all working. And so there isn't, there shouldn't be anybody who has a delay in getting a response back from us. We're filing returns, everything, the tax engine's working perfectly. So all that part's good. Get a hold of me. I'm easy to get a hold of. Anybody, Scott Peterson, scott.peterson@avalara.com. Happy to chat with people.
Okay. Well, we greatly appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge, experience, and the resources that Avalara is putting out there. If anyone needs to talk to us about sales tax, our website is www.salestaxandmore.com, or you can reach out to me directly. It is M. Fleming. Fleming has one M, at salestaxandmore.com. And we hope to see you on the next podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe and check out all of the resources we have out on the web.